Welcome to our smallest masses ever at All Saints Parish. Yesterday, we're growing in numbers though, for those of you who were here yesterday. I think there were a total of 6 people. I think there's, we're up to like 8 or 9, which is very, there's wrong. There are 14 people here. This is awesome. So yesterday I was rambling on about St. John Vianney because it was February 9th and the anniversary of him arriving in Ars in 1818, which then led to some conversations with some brother priests and seminarians yesterday, and so St. John Vianney, when he arrived in the city of Ars, the village of Ars, there were literally about 4 people that came to Mass. By the time he left, the French government laid down railroad tracks for the thousands of people that came. And one of the things that Vianney did was he just railed against working on Sunday, he railed against immorality, but at the same time, ultimately, it doesn't matter what you preach if there's no one there to hear you. People have to come back to church to hear you. And so I was just speaking yesterday about maybe St. John Vianney is really quintessential to us bringing people back to church at a time when there has never been a time in the history of the world that less people are going to church than where we are at right now, universally. And so it led to some really, really, I think, fruitful conversations, and I'd like to just kind of continue to murmur down those. And actually, I would love to hear thoughts and reflections. But right now, in our country, and even universally, there is no plan, there is no program to get people to come back to Mass. And I know I've said this in homilies before, if anybody has heard of one, please let me know, because I'll be the first to buy the DVD and, start, the adult study, but there's nothing out there. So that really has led to St. John Vianney, just in my own prayer, yesterday, it hit me like a thunderbolt. And so if we look at the curé's way, and the word curé is the French word for pastor, so the curé of Ars, and so the little play on this is the curé is the cure, which is actually spelt the exact same way, by the way, C-U-R-E. So if the curé is the cure for bringing people back to Mass, then it has to be a comprehensive piece, and I think a real study of his life. He was able to turn a parish congregation of 4 to literally thousands of people coming to his church every single day. And I think we have to go back to the fact that it wasn't a bulletin blurb, it wasn't one letter that was mailed out, it wasn't it was a comprehensive approach. And I would say that and I'm totally open to for those of you who has read his life or studied him, or I would say that it's these are the things that come to my mind of looking at his life. Number 1, huge devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. It's people need to know why they're going to go to Mass. So he went to Lyon and he bought the biggest tabernacle in Lyon, which was intended for the cathedral. He bought multiple monstrances. He would have Corpus Christi processions. He began adoration. So huge emphasis on the Eucharist. Number 2, he believed that there was truth in beauty. So he completely redid the interior of his parish church. He was quoted saying again and again and again that the sanctuary in Ars can never be beautiful enough. He focused particularly on children. And this is something that I think always gets overlooked in Vianney's life. He opened an orphanage. He literally built an orphanage for children. And every day of his life, even when he was hearing 14 hours of catechism, 14 hours of confession, would every day come out of the confessional at 11 o'clock to teach children their catechism. He was clearly focused on catechizing and working with young people. He did something which was unknown and unheard of at the time, is that he visited every parish household in his boundaries. And we're not talking about the fact that he visited like those who were on his registry. He visited every house in his boundaries. Like, who's doing that? Like, if I look at the list, like, I find like I don't do that. Like, what would happen if, like, we said, like, if we want everybody to come back to church, like, what would it look like? And I'm not, like, if literally we said we are gonna like genuinely go to every single, knock on every door in the parish boundaries and say, we love you and we want you to come to church. He very much so himself did penance and mortification for his people. So there was this understanding that the priest is a sacrificial victim. Fasting, flogging himself, sleeping on the floor. He also was a man who spent many hours in prayer. And in fact, like, the people knew that early in his priesthood, he literally moved into the church and he slept in the church in front of the tabernacle, praying for the conversion of his people. He would go out to where the people were at, not just going to their homes individually, but he would literally go out to them when they were working, and he would engage them in conversation. And then he used his best ability by bringing people back to church who hadn't been back to church in years, and he knew that they couldn't receive communion. So if he wanted them to receive communion when they came to Mass, he had to be in the confessional. So he used his best ability, which is availability, and heard 10 to 14 hours of confession a day later in his life. He also did preach. Some of you might know I wrote my master's thesis when I was in seminary on St. John Vianney. If you think my bulletin articles have a lot of spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, you should see my master's thesis. It's just as creative in that realm. But his preaching, once he attracted the people that came back, his preaching just exposed them to the truth and the reality that God, two things, God like tremendously loved them, and that God was calling to something much more. And so I think like we can use this as a model. I think we should use this as a model. I think we can look at like what's happening here at All Saints and say, okay, like clearly like Vianney has been like a model and a guide in this, but I think like you can never settle. Like Christ says, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Like we can never say like, okay, like this is good enough, or like, and so I look at like a lot of these things that Vianney did and say, okay, like this is, do we want everyone's soul? Or are we satisfied, with where we're at? So I think beautifully the charge is laid before us, and I think Vianney is such a model and a guide for all of us, and it just, like, yesterday was such an eye-opener in that and with that. And so, yeah, I think much for us to pray about and reflect upon on how we embark in this new era. Lent is always a time for us as Catholics to bring people back. 1 week from today will be Ash Wednesday. I mean, like, how amazing is that? I mean, just 1 week from today. And I always I say this all the time, particularly like around this time of year, but like for me, like once Ash Wednesday hits, like it's just like because Stations of the Cross and all these, like I always just feel like once Ash Wednesday hits, like I blink my eyes and it's Easter, and then it's First Communion, and then like it's just like it's so beautiful. I think it's also beautiful, but it's also fast. It happens really, really fast, which means like I'm looking at like, okay, it's February 10th today, but it's going to be April 15th within moments. So if we, as a parish community, like all the more want to embrace people and bring them back to the church, like we know the model. The model doesn't need to be reinvented. It was set forth by Vianney when he arrived in 1818. And we have to all the more, I think, embrace and follow the footsteps of the pastor who's the patron of all of us. So Anyways, just leave those for my reflections tonight, and we'll pray for the continued renewal and upbuilding of the church through the intercession of the Holy Curé of Ars. Okay, hold on. Tonight is I want to invite you all, because you are here. So tomorrow is as you know me well enough, know that I love anniversaries, and I love days. It's part of my OCD numbers. So tomorrow is the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, which I have a huge place in my heart, as is and what not. Tomorrow also marks the 1-year anniversary of Father Hollowell going to the Mayo Clinic and being diagnosed with a brain tumor. So it was yesterday on the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes. He had meetings all day. He had not celebrated Mass yet. They gave him the diagnosis, and they literally said to him, we can't tell you what's going to happen. This is life-threatening. And you look at the journey where he has been between a year ago today and where he is at now. And we've seen it, right? 3 brain surgeries and radiation that didn't shrink the tumor and chemo, and he is. So I just ask your continued healing. I know we have so many people that need prayers, and I'm not so many people need prayers, but I just think that I look at our parish having 3 unbelievable shrines to Our Lady of Lourdes, and just the devotion to Our Lady that exists at this parish, and then all the more the devotion to Our Lady of Fatima that I think was embraced by our parish during the 100th anniversary and the founding of the shrine at the St. Joseph campus in 2017. And I just continue to entrust him again and again to Our Lady, and I just ask of you to do so as well, as we pray for everyone who's sick. And so please pray for him. He has a meeting with his oncologist tomorrow. This is a regularly scheduled meeting, but once again, even just the fact that this meeting got scheduled randomly on the Feast of Our Lady of Lourdes, I think is just who does that but God? So I just hope that 365 days after his first meeting, which was one of the, he admits it, so he actually tells the whole story. So they told him, and then he came into the chapel at the Mayo Clinic, and he's like, I've never cried so hard in my life. And then there was a nun there, because the Mayo Clinic is technically not, it has a really interesting history. It's technically not a Catholic university, a Catholic hospital, but anyways, this little nun who was the sacristan, unlocked the church for him, and she stayed for the Mass, because there was no one else there, and technically you're supposed to celebrate Mass, so anyways, and he said that he just cried he said it was so humiliating, but just he felt the pressure of the world was upon him, and that's when the connection was made about the victims of sexual clergy abuse. It all happened at that moment on February 11th. So here we are 365 days later, and he's meeting with his doctor tomorrow. So just keep him in your prayers. He is doing well. He is finishing up the round next week. So next Sunday will be the completion of round 4, and then he'll begin round 5. So just continue to keep him in your prayers. Sorry for being so wordy tonight, but you have nowhere else to go because it's snowing. So anyways, please stand.